what should O.J. Simpson's legacy be, and how much of his trial paved the way for the debate still simmering today? Well, joining me to discuss all this is academic and author Marc Lamont Hill, lawyer Alan Dershowitz, who was part of O.J.'s Dream Team defence, lawyer Gloria Allred, who represented the family of Nicole Brown Simpson, and Jeffrey Toobin, author of Run of His Life, on which the seminal real crime series American Nightmare, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, was based. Well, welcome to all of you, a stellar panel. Let me start, first of all, if I may, with you, Alan Dershowitz, because you were part of O.J.'s team. Do you think he did it? I mean, he's dead now, you can be honest.
No.
Marc Lamont Hill, race played a massive part in this case. There's no doubt about that. And it was a predominantly black jury which acquitted O.J. Simpson of these crimes. There was a belief by many black Americans at the time that this was one in the eye back at the justice system, which they believed had been skewed so unfairly against their people for a very long time. What do you feel about that?
Well, I think it's a little more complicated than that. But let me first say, this is a historic occasion. It's the first time on television that I am completely agreeing with Alan Dershowitz, while disagreeing at least slightly with Jeffrey Toobin and Gloria Allred. I think first, this was not just a black jury or majority black jury saying, hey, the criminal legal system is racist and therefore we're going to acquit. This wasn't like a nullification moment. Rather, they genuinely believed that the prosecution didn't make its case. They genuinely believed that there was a good chance that evidence was planted. Mark Fuhrman is the reason why O.J. Simpson is not in prison, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, once that man is caught sort of lying and also is effectively invokes the Fifth Amendment at a moment where the jury is now saying, did you manufacture or plant evidence? I think any reasonable person of any race would make the determination if they're not being driven by passion and emotion, but rather what the criminal justice system demands. I think they say that the jury, or rather that the prosecution didn't make its case. I disagree with, and this goes back to your question, Piers, I disagree with Jeffrey to the extent that O.J. Simpson was absolutely held accountable. You know, if O.J. Simpson spent a considerable amount of time in prison for a crime of theft and kidnapping that no person would have done that amount of time for. If O.J. Simpson had been caught jaywalking in Los Angeles, they would have given him 20 years if they could. So I think there's a way that O.J. Simpson later in his career honestly got a worse outcome from the criminal legal system than he deserved. But let me be very clear. O.J. Simpson's a killer. O.J. Simpson, long before he killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman, was an awful person. I have no defense of O.J. Simpson. He absolutely is the killer, but the criminal justice system is not designed, as Alan said, as a fact-finding scientific mission. You're balancing the fact-finding with this other principle. And you can't go around convicting people if it's clear that the prosecution and the police didn't play by the rules. And I think for a long time, black people have seen the criminal justice system not play by the rules, and it results in black people being unlawfully incarcerated or police being exonerated, as the LAPD were all the time for beating black people. So yeah, there was a reaction to the legal system, but it wasn't a jury just saying, you know what, the system's unfair, so let's let OJ off. It was them saying, hey, the system's unfair, and this is an example of the prosecution making some bad moves that they probably didn't have to make. I think if they don't plant a glove, I think if Mark Fuhrman never steps into this, he'll still be found guilty. The evidence, as Jeffrey said, was voluminous, but they overplayed their hand and they put too much dip on their chip, and now O.J. Simpson is guilty, or found not guilty, excuse me.
Well, that's a really interesting point. I saw Alan Dershowitz agreeing with that. I mean, it's interesting. Fuhrman, who was one of the lead detectives in this case, obviously was corrupt, and he obviously did try to fit up O.J. Simpson with false evidence, but not
that there were other people in the lab, none of whom saw Van Adder do this. Van Adder had no history.
It wasn't in the lab. It was at his home. Jeffrey, it was at his home.
Let me just jump in for 1 second, guys. What I'm hearing from Jeffrey, though, is an interesting point, which is that there's no direct evidence there's no incontrovertible evidence that it was Van Adder who did the tampering. But Alan's point is still a strong one, which is there is considerable evidence, overwhelming evidence, that the evidence was tampered with and that someone poured blood on a sock. Let's say it's not Van Adder. The point still is the sock
was Van Adder.
I'm not saying it wasn't. My point, though, is even if I accepted Jeffrey's point that it wasn't him, the point to me, and as a juror, if I'm watching this, I don't care which person planted it. I don't care who put the chemical on it. I just know that the evidence was planted
I think
Why
it's
didn't
very
you write
tough.
about it
I
in
mean,
your book,
remember,
Jeffrey? Why didn't you write
Alan,
about it in your book?
I don't remember why I didn't write about it in my book, Alan.
I
It's
do
been a long
remember.
time.
I do remember why you didn't write about it in your book, because you didn't want to present evidence that undercut your own thesis of guilt. You weren't a fair writer when it came to describing
Alan,
the facts. At least write about it. Put the evidence forward. Put the evidence forward that you think is contradictory. You're saying it's contradictory. You haven't given us one bit of evidence. Tell me the name of the person, the expert, who testified that there wasn't EDTA. There were none. They all admitted it.
This is a case of a domestic violence homicide where a man with a cut on his left index, his left middle finger, walked away from the crime scene bleeding and bled at the crime scene wearing size 11 Bruno Magli shoes that he was photographed in earlier.
I'm not disputing any of that.
Okay,
You're missing the point. I want to know what your evidence is that there wasn't evidence tampering.
With all due respect, Jeffrey, it does seem like you're redirecting us here. You're pointing to all the strong evidence that's compelling, and I think you're right. There is strong and compelling evidence. Remember, I think he did it.
I agree.
But there's also evidence here that there was tampering, and it's likely that the police were involved in this tampering, and so both things can be true. It seems to me that, and I haven't heard you respond to the EDTA point here. On what basis would we believe that chemical could be there other than through tampering?
You know what? I did not go back on my research on EDTA before this appearance about a case that's 30 years old. This was disputed.
Go back now.
Well, okay, I'll do that, Alan. But the idea that we are sitting here fixated on one piece of evidence when there was so much evidence against O.J. Simpson that it is,
the jury
was
fixated.
But
Jeffrey,
if
I may jump in, let me jump in. Apart from anything else, I find this it's fascinating. It's like being back in the courtroom at the time, honestly. But I think, Jeffrey, the key point here surely is if we accept, as Alan has forcefully presented, if we accept that the police did literally fit up the blood on the sock evidence, as Mark and Alan have both said, that was probably a major factor in this jury deciding not to find him guilty. So it was a crucial point. Maybe the most crucial point.
It could well be. But I mean, this is also a philosophical debate about the criminal justice system. That, is it a method for policing, for disciplining and punishing police misconduct, or is it a search for the truth? And I think even if the jury thought the evidence was tampered with, which I don't think it was, but even if they thought that, the idea that you would let O.J. Simpson go is wrong. And I don't think, in light of all the evidence that he was of his guilt, I don't think you punish society and you punish the victims and their victims' families by acquitting him, even if you have questions.
So you're against the Constitution. You're against the Constitution. The Constitution provides for an exclusionary rule. Don't talk over each other. The Constitution says you acquit the guilty if the evidence was improperly obtained. Jeffrey, rewrite the Constitution. Undo Mapp versus Ohio. But the law is clear. If the evidence is illegally obtained, the defendant can't be convicted based on that evidence, even if the defendant is guilty. This is a philosophical dispute that was resolved in Mapp versus Ohio.
Whether it would work, I don't know.
Mark, I mean, it's an interesting point Jeffrey makes there, but of course, ultimately, George Floyd's killer was brought to justice emphatically. Do you think the justice system has improved in terms of how Black Americans are treated?
No, not at all. And I think that the data would bear that out. I think what's changed, though, is our perception of the criminal justice system and the criminal legal system. I think back then it was even harder to get people to believe that a police officer would plant evidence. If you remember how hard it was to get people to accept police brutality in Los Angeles until the Rodney King tape comes out, and then it's like, oh wait, this this is what you were talking about. The George Floyd moment, I think, was a powerful one because all of America during a pandemic was forced to watch. We had nothing else to do. We were forced to watch this awful video of this black man killed in front of our eyes. Just this absolutely devastating. And many white people, many white liberals, many white conservatives, people from across the aisle were saying, wait a minute, this is wrong, and maybe we have a systemic problem here. I think the jury is more likely in 2024 to exonerate on that basis, because before there's the question of, well, we have to give police the benefit of the doubt, but now there's less doubt. We believe that police do this kinds of stuff, these kinds of things, and so I actually think it's easier to get an exoneration or an acquittal at this moment than before.
I just want to end by asking all of you to sum up in one sentence O.J. Simpson. Alan Dershowitz.
I have no brief for O.J. Simpson, the person. I think his case contributed positively to seeing police.
Wow.
Emphatically put. Mark?
O.J. Simpson was an awful, awful human being. He was a liar. He was an abuser. He was a killer. He is somebody, as a black person, I can tell you, who abandoned his African American community long before he jumped in that Bronco and ran from the police. He was using white vehicles to escape black realities. He never wanted to be part of us. And so I have no regard for O.J. Simpson. And it's unfortunate that he became a symbol of the flaws and the fractures in America's criminal legal system. It's unfortunate that the prosecution made such an awful series of errors that allowed for his acquittal to happen. But let's be very clear. His acquittal was right. It was fair. It was just. It was necessary. It was American law. You let 10 guilty people go rather than let one innocent person be caged. That's just what it says. And it's unfortunate that only when it's OJ do we see this outrage about that principle. So I hate that it was OJ, but it still had to be OJ. That's just the reality of it.
Right. Right. Marc Lamont, Hill, Alan Dershowitz, Jeffrey Toobin. A brilliant debate. Thank you all very much.